Here's Brody Brazil.
Look, I'm just your average baseball fan. I know I work in broadcasting. I guess technically you could say I work in professional baseball. That might be a reach, but I suppose I should understand it more than most. However, with these recent developments and conversations, I'm not sure I exactly comprehend what the heck is going on here. These are things realistically being discussed, evaluated, contemplated, and negotiated between the players and Major League Baseball. Things that might come to reality in a next baseball season or a one shortly after that. Are we really going to ban the shift finally? I suppose I shouldn't be surprised by that. It's been discussed now for years, maybe decades, but it's been going on for many more decades than that. I'll explain later. Pitch clocks. Are we actually going to do this? Are we going to follow through with this? Is it really going to have an impact? We'll get to that later. And also, larger bases? What? All right, let me begin with something I do kind of understand the most, banning the shift. Again, this has been discussed for the last several years. Finally, it's reached that boiling point, that tipping point. But come on, they were shifting on Ted Williams back in the day. This is nothing new. I feel like baseball fans feel like it is, but it's definitely not. And there may be a difference between shading and shifting. You see that down here in my notes. So maybe they used to shade him, and now, everybody's literally getting shifted. It's not just the Ted Williams of the game. But number one here, above anything else, is this actually going to improve the game, and how? By banning the shift, you're basically saying, all right, the hitters lost that battle because we gave them in the entire left field. They couldn't do anything with it. They couldn't even lay down a bunt, or they didn't want to a majority of the time. That type of stuff would have beat the shift. You don't have to ban the shift if hitters could have consistently beat the shift. They didn't do it. So here now Major League Baseball is saying and considering, and the players might be in for this too, that you can't do it. But I don't understand why. I also don't understand how we're exactly going to enforce this. We're going to draw lines out there on the field, like say, all right, this is where a left fielder can play. This is where a second baseman can play. This is where a shortstop can play. This is where a third baseman can play. And nope, if you put one cleat outside of that line, you are shifting. That's illegal. And then how do we enforce that? How do we stop it? Do the umpires stop play? Do they have to check every position player, every play, every pitch, I should say? How do we define these positions on the field? What's the rule there? Obviously, every Major League Baseball diamond is different, not the infield, but more the outfield. The fence dimensions at Fenway Park. I mean, how do we do this? And that's the whole thing, infield versus outfield. Are we only banning the shift in the infield? Are we banning it in the outfield too? Can you not shade now? Do you have to play straight up every single time? So what defines this? How do you even begin? This seems so overly complicated. And then let me ask you the question. How do you enforce it every single pitch? Because if somebody is technically shifting and the pitch happens and the play happens and that, let's say shortstop got to a ball in the hole that otherwise they normally wouldn't have, whatever the situation is, you can't go back and challenge it and say, well, I think he was out of position. Let's go back and look. You have to enforce it before the pitch is even made. So if you want to speed the game up, this does definitely not feel like something that's going to make baseball go faster. So these are my questions. Does it improve the game? How do we define the positions? How do we enforce this? What's the difference between shading, like take a couple steps to your left or your right, and or shifting? And how do we do this between the infield and the outfield? Pitch clocks. Are they actually going to be enforced? Like, for example, they have the clock between innings, and oftentimes you see that thing tick all the way down to 0, and we're still not playing baseball. So now we're shaving off how much time per game? Because let's be honest, I'm a proponent of finding ways to make baseball a little bit more efficient on the clock. I know a lot of hardcore players and traditionalists will say that you can't do this, you can't introduce any clocks. Well, there have already been clocks now associated with baseball. We're not breaking that barrier here, but now we're putting one between each pitch. And it's going to be prominent, and it's going to rush a pitcher, it's going to rush a batter, it's going to cause conflicts. It might actually extend the game more than you think, rather than only cutting it down. And how much time are we really going to gain? Hypothetically, if it's 2 seconds per batter, are we getting like 3 minutes shortened off a game? Because if that's all we're carving here, we need to go more like 20 minutes. We need to find a way to make baseball 3 hours or less on a regular basis. And I know that's not entirely possible, but that's got to be the goal. If you want to make baseball digestible, I'm not saying it's the right thing to do here, but if you want to make it appealing to younger audiences, if you want to make it so that most fans can watch most games, they don't have to sit through a 4-hour and 22-minute game a couple days in a row, then you've got to really shorten baseball. 3 or 4 minutes, this is negligible. It doesn't even matter. And what's the penalty, by the way? So you're going to enforce this, right? All right. Pitcher took too long, or the batter took too long, digging in the box or whatever. What's the penalty? Is it instant ball or instant strike? I mean, I guess that could be one. I just made that up. But now you're really altering baseball. Adding balls and strikes on pitches that weren't even thrown? Yikes. Let's talk about larger bases. What? Why are we doing this? Now, I understand most people's initial impressions, or at least what I've seen on social, is they might make the bases higher, more like a pillow, or change the shape of it. Now, I don't think that's it. Obviously, I think what we're dealing with is larger ground space, right? A larger area on the ground, a larger base, so that the distance between first and second, instead of being, if we're going middle to middle, 90 feet, if it's a couple inches short on each side, maybe it's 88 feet something inches, whatever. But I think what Major League Baseball and the players might be talking about here is making bases bigger so that leads can be just a little bit longer, and so that getting to hypothetically second base is just a little bit shorter. So that more players are base stealers, so that there's more incentive to try and steal a base, make baseball more exciting. I don't think catchers like this. Pitchers definitely don't like this. But let me ask you a real question. Shaving off, hypothetically, let's say it's 3 inches on both sides. Is 6 inches going to make a difference for most players to want to get that jump and go? I mean, there's a lot of bang plays. Don't get me wrong. I do think it will have some tangible effect, some noticeable effect. But large scale, and maybe they don't want large scale, but even meaningful scale. How many more players are going to run or are going to be told to run because at the most we're shaving off 6 inches between first and second base? I think some players need 6 feet sometimes to know. Oh, and you see my other note here. Larger bases. I don't understand this. I'm assuming that's the only reason. And I've talked to many people across baseball. I've asked for, talking former players, current players, managers, front office personnel. I've been asking around, what is up with larger bases? Nobody really seems to know. There's also a consideration maybe of a safety aspect. But how does larger bases equal more safety? More area to slide into? I guess you don't have the conflict of fielder, like third baseman, applying a tag and blocking most of the base. They can't now if you make it wider, I suppose. Does that make it safer, though, for the runner and fielder? They're eventually going to try and get to the same place anyway. It's small geography. I really don't understand this. The only thing I can visualize and can hope for, what if we put cameras and microphones in every single base? If you're going to make it larger, I'm thinking battery pack in there. I'm thinking transmitter. I'm thinking camera, let's say third base, for example. I want to see from third base on the ground looking towards second so I can see the third baseman, the shortstop, maybe the right side of the infield, nice wide angle lens. I also want one facing home plate so I can see a runner kind of rounding third. I want that view of what they see running to home plate. And a microphone in every single one of them. Now, I don't know that we're going to be able to take these microphones live. That would be compromising, maybe player, not security, but privacy. But in a replay situation, if there's something interesting that we can hear after the fact and it's been, filtered, moderated, approved, okay. that might be great. That's a great reason to make bases bigger if we need more room for battery packs and transmitters and microphones and cameras. Other than that, what are we doing? So that's what baseball's talking about right now. Again, none of these things are for certain, but the players and owners are negotiating, and these are some of the things on the table. We've already seen the DH the DH staying for good, pitchers hitting, gone for good. And that's a major enough change, right, for the National League. But these other ones, some of them are bigger than others. Some of them, I guess I understand, but some of them I feel like I have absolutely no clue why these things are on the table. Let me know what you think in the comments section below.